I should say that all of his sketches are done with crayon, and they're beautiful. The first sketch I received was of his character Major North, which appeared in the Toronto Comics Anthology. I'll talk a little bit more about Major North in a few minutes. The second time I met Sam was at Toronto Comic Con this past March, and I actually showed him a picture on my phone of Victoria, and she was smiling, laughing for the camera, and Sam produced a beautiful sketch of my little girl, which I absolutely love, and my wife loves it too. And Victoria got to look at it, and she was quite impressed with it. And then when I met Sam a couple of weeks ago, at Paradise Comics for the launch of his Zip Kramer Savior of the Cosmos trade, which I'll be talking about later in the show, Victoria was there with me. And so Sam gave Victoria a beautiful sketch of one of the characters he has co-created, Sunny. And I'll be talking about Sunny and Owl Girl as well on this show. All of these sketches I need to get frames for and find really nice spots in the apartment for them. His sketches are just works of joy, just a pleasure to look at. But again, when it comes to the stories that he writes, Sam has a real knack, a real skill for finding artists who can produce art that marries itself perfectly with the tone of the stories that he's writing, whether they be humorous stories, whether they be kid-friendly stories, whether they be about monsters or satire or outer space, Flash Gordon style adventures. Sam really knows how to go out and find comics talent to work with him. So I think it's time for me to get talking about some of his works. And I don't know if any of his work, outside of that which has appeared in the Toronto Comics Anthology, is available digitally. So let me look up Sam's email address right now. And I'll have to make sure to include his email in the show notes. But on the inside cover of most of his works, he lists his email address as Samurai Noir, all one word, Samurai Noir at hotmail.com. So certainly give Sam a shout through his email. He also has a couple of Facebook pages which he administers. He's also got Comics and Toys webpage, so I'll put those in the notes on the Comics and History Facebook page as well, so you can get in touch with Sam and find out, if you don't live in the Toronto area, how you can still get your hands on his really impressive works. About 3 or 4 episodes ago, I was talking about the Toronto Comics Anthology series, which will be going into its 5th volume next year. And Sam has made a number of contributions to the Toronto Comics Anthology, whether as a writer and or as a letterer. And one of the first stories that I read that was written by Sam was Major North, and he's actually had it printed as a standalone issue. But for those of you who don't live in the Toronto area, probably the best way to go to get your hands on a copy of this really neat story is to go through the Toronto Comics Anthology website. Major North, this is a Canadian comic superhero who I think is so very deserving of his own ongoing title. I once asked Sam if there would be a second issue, and he said, not right now. The artist Christopher Yao has a number of already existing commitments, but this is a great first issue, or a great zero issue, looking at the standalone. Major North is the living physical embodiment of the Canadian spirit. And when the story opens, Canada has become a post-apocalyptic police state, and we see Major North in his civilian guise along with 4 other Canadians, all of diverse backgrounds, who are imprisoned, and they have to find their way out. Not only do they have to find their way out of prison, but they have to find out how to reboot the Canadian spirit in order for Major North to get his powers back and take down the white supremacist supervillain named Uberman. Uberman was the one who used the Spear of Destiny to attack Major North, thereby desecrating the Canadian spirit and leaving Major North powerless. A lot of action in this short story that's all in black and white. It's a really neat climax and ending to it, so you get to see Major North in costume. We also get to see the 4 people who become his comrades in arms, help him against Uberman. I just love to see this become an ongoing series. Major North has this really neat red and white Canadian themed costume, but it looks completely unique compared to other Canadian themed superheroes such as Captain Canuck and Northgard. Looking at some of Sam's other works, here's a really fun one. It's called The Monsters Brawl, and the art is again by Christopher Yao, and it tells the story of Dr. Vigo Prometheus, a real Dr. Frankenstein type character. He's a brilliant scientist, but he has a horrible reputation. He's quite proud of himself, and he's gotten to the point where he needs a companion in his life. But the doctor, being the narcissistic sort of person he is, doesn't go out and find a human companion. Rather, he makes a companion, a robot companion, who almost from the start falls for his handsome, charming demeanor. But sadly, Dr. Prometheus gives in to his raging ego, and he decides that companionship with a female robot isn't enough, and so he goes one step further, trying to create another female companion, this time out of living flesh and various body parts. And it makes for an interesting conflict between his robot love and his new Bride of Frankensteinish love. Really neat to see what the 2 pseudo women in his life do in order to resolve their conflict with each other as well as with the doctor. The last page is a really great punchline. I don't want to spoil it for you, but I read the last page and I said, yeah, that is a really smart twist on a classic take on the Frankenstein story. This one's in full color too, and it looks really, really great. There's also a couple of books I picked up. One's called Fandemonium, the comic strip. The other is called Fan Fiction, the comic strip. And these 2 books highlight Sam's ability to give us really humorous vignettes, all within the space of one landscape-oriented panel or maybe a couple of smaller panels. One of Sam's real talents is his ability to tell these one and done stories in less than 10 pages. And in fan fiction and fandemonium, you take it one step further, where you just have some really neat panels that make fun various elements of pop culture, whether it be Batman and Robin, Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Doctor Who. There's one really neat panel here. And it takes place on Mos Eisley on Tatooine, and we see two stormtroopers going gaga over the Cylons 6 and Boomer from the 2000s revival of Battlestar Galactica, and one of the stormtrooper is so head over his heels in love with these two Cylons, his tongue is literally hanging outside of his mask, and he says, "These are the droids we're looking for." Juxtaposed with another panel where two classic Battlestar Galactica Cylons beat up another two stormtroopers outside of the cantina on Tatooine. And this time one stormtrooper holding his head says, "Those weren't the droids we're looking for." Just some really fun stuff there. In addition to producing really great one-and-done stories that are meant to be enjoyed by a more adult audience, Sam is also really wonderful at writing comics for kids. And so I made sure at least a couple of the occasions where I met Sam to pick up some of his kid-friendly work. And this is stuff which I'm really looking forward to sharing with Victoria in a couple of years. So let me just tell you about three of his works. One is called Munchsters, and these are little kid monsters. So one is a take on Frankenstein, the other is a take on a zombie whose different limbs are always falling off of its body. We have a little mummy girl, we have a blob, a little bat, a little witch, and they're all just having various adventures, whether it be on the baseball diamond, trying to keep the zombie from losing his arm every time he catches a fly ball in the air. Some of the aliens, or some of the monsters, don't speak the same language, and so they've got to figure out a way to communicate with each other. Just really fun 2-3 page stories, really great for kids who are just getting into comics. And let me see, the art is by, the credits are Sam and Dill. Sam writes and Dill draws. Okay, there's another really fun one called Skelt and AP. Again, written by Sam with art by Stephanie Lean. And Stephanie, I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. Stephanie was also at the launch party for Zip Kramer, the graphic novel at Paradise Comics. She actually contributed to the pinup gallery that appears in the back of the Zip Kramer graphic novel. And here she provides some gorgeous art, completely kid-friendly art for the story of Skelt and AP. AP is a little ape girl, and Skelt is a walking, talking skeleton of some sort of creature. And the story revolves around Skelt and AP wanting to buy fresh choco cookies from a local vendor, but unfortunately they don't have any money. So they have to go into a community and see if there are any odd jobs which they can do for their neighbors. And then the fun twist at the